It is quite fascinating to observe the significant change that is evidently taking place in the US cryptocurrency sector. But, as I'll be discussing, we're also beginning to notice some significant barriers being placed in our path, which is somewhat impeding our progress. The major development, however, is that the XRP SEC issue is finally resolved. Essentially, the final round of this process was the Ripple vs. SEC side. Since we are aware that XRP was cleared in 2023, the case is now formally, essentially over. We will discuss that, I believe. We will deal with it. Let's get right to the first significant announcement that I truly want to discuss, which comes from Brian Armstrong. According to Coinbase co-founder and CEO, we made significant strides this week toward US cryptocurrency legislation, with more to follow next week. Draft law on market structure was introduced and considered. Stablecoin legislation is still being brought to the floor by bipartisan efforts, and it is expected to be voted on again early next week. After years of being marginalized, crypto isn't just at the table, it's at the top of the agenda. Yes, this is a very big shift around the momentum with crypto, and we are clearly seeing the spotlight put on it in a big way. Stand with Crypto Day happening at 5/14 next week, with over 60 crypto founders coming to Washington, D.C., advocates will continue to beat this drum. However, we still need to see some more work done because our progress has kind of stopped here and we're starting to see more delays, which is a significant problem. If you're not familiar with it, we have the big upgrade, which is the Genius Act. As a result, the Genius Act was not approved by the Senate. The measure would have established the first stable-coin regulatory framework in U.S. history if it had been approved. Now, I do believe that this is actually sort of adhering to the previous plan, which was that we would have things finished by August. This isn't particularly important, in my opinion. The timing, in my opinion, is August. Therefore, even though it did fail and was delayed, I don't think that should be a cause for alarm. The United States will enact stable coin legislation. We are aware that this will be a major focus, not only from the regulators but also from the full-on presidential administration, Scott Bent, and even Trump, who has been talking about stable coins. It's crazy that Trump already has his own stable coin, but stable coins are becoming increasingly important for the US to use as a financial tool and as support for the dollar. Therefore, when we consider this, I believe that it is simply one speed bump that we will eventually overcome before we begin to move back into overdrive. As I mentioned, there is nothing to worry about even though this didn't pass. Here, Senate Republicans did provide us with an update. The Genius Act was just defeated by Senate Democrats and Chuck Schumer. The US dollar would appreciate under this historic bipartisan bill. As I mentioned before, the dollar is the main objective, and these stable coins help it and give Americans greater financial independence. Instead of acting in America's best interests, Democrats would rather play politics. We also received an update. I apologize, that was the incorrect one. I assumed I had it open, but let me quickly grab it. A single second. You guys have it right here. I apologize, this was the other post from the banking GOP that I wanted to mention. After months of discussions with experts and stakeholders, the Genius Act was enacted by the banking GOP with 5 Democrats in favor, protecting consumers and enhancing national security. Politics, not policy, was the focus of today's vote. And while it's not only about backing stable coins, this video sort of explains how vital this act as a whole is. In terms of becoming a leader not only in our existing financial system but also in the digital financial system. Take a look. At the Banking Committee, the Genius Act was a bipartisan accomplishment. It was a bipartisan accomplishment because, before the hearing, we spent weeks and months debating day in and day out. You were there, Mr. President, for hours upon hours. During this session, we presented around 80 amendments to the Banking Committee. In the Banking Committee, we cast our votes on 40 amendments. We decided to make the American people's economy safer and more affordable. What did we witness, however, when the lights were turned on and the cameras were observing? We saw the same Democratic colleagues who saw how critical it was to introduce stable coins into the transparent, accountable regulatory system. They voted for the measure they shaped, but we saw them back off and vote against it. What was different? What was different? Mr. What changed? President? Not the content. In the last 5 revisions of the legislation, they were able to get more of what they desired. What changed? Politics was the president. Not the legislation, not the policy, and not the content. Politics. You guys have it there. Yes, You see, I don't get why this stuff didn't just get passed through in the end. Despite the fact that it is somewhat absurd, I believe that this will be resolved before the end of the summer. Actually, it kind of fits with the first time frame that, was released by Trump as well as by David Sachs and Scott Bent. We should have stable coin laws by the end of the summer, which should allow the US to have a stable coin market. On top of that, let's discuss the major one. The SEC government has announced a settlement with Chris Rizin, Brad Garlinghouse, and Ripple. Ripple will pay $50 million of the $125 million penalty, with the remaining amount being returned to the parties. If the court decides to lift the injunction on Ripple, both sides will drop their appeals. I already think that there's a timeline here behind all of this stuff that's, where we're kind of right on track with. It kind of goes back to even the original idea of this SEC lawsuit. Like everyone always stated this lawsuit, it was all by plan. It was, to make sure that all the big players can catch up. And it kind of does feel like that. Ever since, we got the announcement of Trump winning back in November. From that point on, everything just kind of started to align perfectly. And I just feel like it's too, coincidental that everything is just aligned perfectly now. And we're already starting to see all these big, announcements. We're seeing Ripple expand rapidly. Like think about the institutional investors that are jumping in now and all the institutional players right at the same exact time that Ripple has been fully focused on institutions for years and years and years now and saying that institutional adoption is coming in 2025. You just cannot you can't look at this and say no, this was definitely not planned or align perfectly with Ripple. It just feels as if it's all by design. So, in my opinion, I think that we get stablecoin legislation by the end of August. I think that we'll probably have this Ripple case all signed up and, put behind us and resolved completely by the end of this month. It's essentially finished, we just need to wait out the legality process, but I do believe that institutional grade adoption around Ripple and even XRP will accelerate significantly as a result of all of this. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe notifications if you want more free content. You can also join the free Discord channel in the description below. That's Nick. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.